It's an early, damp morning. The air is still cool, but I can feel that this will be another hot day in its 30s. I'm walking towards the hospital that I've been helping the last couple of months, and if you look at me, you would see a firm face, and I walk with a fast pace, because we have some serious problems that we are facing right now. Here's a few of them. The first thing is that we don't earn any money. In fact, we're earning so little money that we can't pay our bills, and even salaries have been forwarded by the HR administrator. The second thing is that we just discovered that the hospital has an operational permit that hasn't been renewed in 1.5 years. And the third thing is that the salaries that we actually do pay are way below half of the minimum standard in the city. That's an offense with a jail time of 5 years. Now, I'm walking to the hospital pretty fast because I want to see how they are doing on the big renovation project that we started with the roof. And as I enter the hospital lobby, I'm met by some really strange signs. There's water dripping down from the floor, and there's big buckets collecting this water. That thing over there, that is our X-ray machine collecting water dripping down from the ceiling. How can this be? There's a whole floor up. I go outside again and I see this site. Anything strange with this picture? There's no roof. They've taken off the roof, but they have not put on a new roof, and it's been raining heavily for 10 days straight. So I rush back into the hospital again, and I see more and more disturbing signs of something not being correct. Water is dripping down the wall, into the fuse box, into our pharmacy, and even Jesus has molds on him. So I realize I need to check something. I go up to the second floor, where no one from the hospital has been yet, and I'm greeted by this sight. Basically, the roof has fallen in, and then rain has fallen for several days straight on top of it, creating a big mush of moldified earth, and the stench is unbearable. It stinks from mold. And as I walk around, I see more and more problems here, because about 60% of all the beds in the hospitals is now totally unusable. That area cannot be used at all. It's devastating. It's like walking around in a graveyard. And the sight is actually too much for me, so all of a sudden I just find myself on the floor on my knees, and I feel tears streaming down my cheeks. There was not really much we could do. We just tried to start to dig. In fact, the first thing we did was digging with our hands, because the hospital didn't have any shovels. As we were digging, I had only one thought that went on and on in my head. This hospital is dead. There's no coming back from this. Hi, welcome. This is a story about how Kanban was used to save a Salvation Army hospital in Indonesia. Twice. The story is about how a hospital that had no roof, no patients, no permit, became a profitable hospital with a lot of patients coming through it with a roof, using an hypothesis-driven management method in 1.5 years. And the driver behind this was Kanban. And I'm extremely proud to have been a little part of this journey together with all the awesome people at the hospital. So my name is Marcus Hammarberg. I work for a small consultancy in Stockholm called Aptitude. I have one wife, 2 hobbies, and 3 kids. I've been a developer since 98 or something like that, but lately, or the last 12 years or so, I've been focusing more and more on how you work effectively together, using agile methods such as Scrum, and also lately Kanban. Oh, by the way, this is the best Kanban book I ever written. Yeah. Soon there will be 2 books, so I'm milking that joke for whatever it's worth, okay? Yeah. All right, so me and my family, we moved to Indonesia to work for Salvation Army, our church. Indonesia is a really big country that very few Westerners know much about. It's the 5th largest country in the world, 240 million people. We were living here in a small city called Bandung with 10 million people in it. The Salvation Army is pretty big in Indonesia and governs 6 hospitals shown here throughout the country and 17 clinics. My wife is a nurse, so she actually knows what she's talking about, and I'm not a nurse. I was trying to help the hospitals to devise some strategic plans and make them better, but that work progressed really slowly. So it turned out that the hospital that was just 200 meters from where we lived actually was in dire need, which this story is all about. So that's why I was engaged in that. And before we continue, yes, we are the TV family. If you've seen that show, it's called Familje på Äventyr. So this is my family when we're in Indonesia. I don't want to talk about that. Okay, if I got to start talking about this, I could probably go on for at least a couple of days with stories. So when I started to prepare for this presentation, I needed some kind of guidelines for myself. And I started to read and research what Kanban actually is all about. And I found out that there's some basic principles of Kanban and basic practices, core practices. And it turns out that we actually did all of this in the work we did with the hospital. Many times without me telling them, and sometimes without me knowing it. So I thought that this will be a really good way for me to describe this story, so we don't spend the rest of the evening talking here. I know that I'm the one that's holding your back for the beers, so I will be fast, okay? So that means that I have 3 goals with this presentation. First of all, I want you to be inspired by this story. And secondly, I want you to learn something about Kanban, and maybe I could also just entertain you with the hardship and maybe even scare you about the hardship and how we persevered from this. All right, let's go. The first principle of Kanban is start where you are, and that's pretty simple when the roof of a hospital falls in, right? There's basically just one thing that you can do. So we didn't have time to devise any new roles or any new principles for how to work or anything like that. We need just to start working where we are. But that principle, start where you are, it sounds almost silly. How could you not start where you are? You might ask yourself. Well, that would be exactly that. That would be me telling you the new roles, the new principles that we're going to work after. When I reflected back on this story, I realized that I didn't mention Kanban a single time. All of a sudden, people just said, what are we going to do? And we just started with some simple practices. So another way that not starting where you are can manifest itself was clearly shown for us, because what do you think the first thing you do when a roof falls in of the hospital? The first question that gets asked was, yeah, exactly. Who's responsible? Well, I'm sorry, that will not help us right now. So I actually, in many meetings, I created what's known as the not list. This is things that we're not going to talk about in this meeting, and on top of that, every meeting I wrote, who's to blame? We can talk about that later if it's still interesting, but not right now. I really want the roof on this hospital, okay? There's an old English joke, sorry guys in the workshop, you get to hear it again. A man walks up to a cab in London and asks, how do I get from here to Piccadilly Circus? And the cabbie responds, that's really hard. I would not start from here. No, right, but this is where I am. Can you please help me now? This principle makes you very powerful, because now you can apply the reasoning, improving from whatever position you are in. You don't need to change a thing. Start where you are. I don't care where here is. I just want to be a little bit better tomorrow than we were today. speaking of good places to start, the visualize principle practice is a really good starting point. This is where we make the work visual. And we visualized many things during the 1.5 year I worked with the hospital, but I wanted to relate a specific story where I got the biggest collective jaw drop in my life. I'm going to take these off because they keep falling out. So we had many problems, as you remember, but we decided that the number one thing we needed to focus on was actually getting money. It turned out that someone calculated afterwards that we were about 6 weeks out of bankruptcy when we started to work with this. Luckily, no one told us when we were working there. Otherwise, I wouldn't have dared move. So we started a few things because this is now priority one, so important that we are actually working on it. So we started 3 activities to try to get more patients to the hospital to earn some more money to survive. Right? But even though we heard talks about sense of urgency before, and even though this is like natural to understand that this is very, very important, I didn't see the connection among the people. It was still like people felt, this is management problem. It's been bad for a long time. They will solve it. That kind of attitude. So I wanted to show them the problem, but I wanted them also to feel the problem. Because right now it felt like they didn't really understood. So we got together, me and the finance guy in my team, and we calculated how much money this hospital needs to earn every month in order to break even. But in Indonesia, they are using a currency called rupiahs. And if you express how much money they need to earn each month in rupiahs, it doesn't really make any sense. And even if you start to break it down into per day, it's still just too much. It's like 12 million rupees per day, and the lady in the laundry, she earned 1 million per month. So it didn't make any sense. So instead we started to count how many patients, how many services do we need to sell each day. If you come to the hospital and meet a doctor, go to the pharmacy and maybe have some drugs, that's 3 services. We took just the average price of everything, and we came up with like, well, okay, we need 134 patients each day to come through our door. Or rather, services sold, but that's how we thought about it. And that was our target. So if we did that, we would also earn some money so that we could develop the hospital. Now I asked the director, a young woman, Dr. Lillian, I asked her, go in front of your hospital and tell them how we're doing. We drew this diagram, a huge diagram. I drew it way too high because the average Indonesian person is about 30 centimeters shorter than me. So they would never reach, that created a lot of problems. But not now, though, because we were not scoring high. Right? So I asked her now to stand in front of her staff and telling how we're really doing. And this was hard for her because we were doing crap. So this is the goal, 134, and this is our how many patients we had. Imagine the shame. In Indonesia, you would never admit weakness as a leader. So now she's standing there in front of her. I think if you want to feel that, imagine standing here without pants. That's the feeling she had. And we now plotted these numbers in here and showed that in front of the staff. What do you think their reaction was to these numbers? This is not good, right? The reaction was a little bit like that, actually. People were like, okay. I saw someone, and I saw 2 girls in the working in the kitchen in behind. They were like giggling. No reaction. I was appalled, so I stood up from my chair and I said, why are you not appalled? And then I realized, let's add another line. So I wrote another line here with a break-even point, and I said, this is the lose money line. If we're below this line, we lost money by running the hospital that day. Now, it was totally quiet, and I saw many people like that. 70 jaws fell to the floor at the same time. So what happened there really? Well, we used a lot of powerful ideas. where we started where we were, we visualized our work, we made it understandable, and we showed transparency. So we used these learnings to establish what we called the Bungsu. The hospital is called the Rumah Sakit, which is hospital in Indonesian. Rumah Sakit Bungsu. So we established the Bungsu visualization rules, but we wanted to break them from time to time, so we called it the Bungsu visualization pirate code. You know the pirate code from Pirates of the Caribbean? It's not really a code. That's right. So, but I want to share it with you. Here's the code that we had, the Rumah Sakit visualization pirate code. So first of all, it needs to be really big. We had the entire staff in front of us every morning, so we had a diagram that was at least this big, so that everyone could see it. It needs to be easy to understand. Some of the people that worked there, they could not even read or write. But they understood below this, bad, above, good, all right? It might sound silly, but remember, if you don't read or write, right? As a team, as a management team, we focused on we didn't focus on individual numbers, we focused on trends because we focused on learning. This might sound obvious to us, but most measurement in Indonesia in organizations are done to punish people, basically. If you don't have any target, then there's no use measuring it because people will not be interested. And finally, and this is very important, you want something that moves fast. If I would have said every last of the month we will update this diagram, then people would not have cared. Now it took like 2 days, and then before we plotted the next thing, you could hear the anticipation in the audience. And then we put a high number, yay, they were cheering, right? And we put a low number, you could hear, oh, like that. Okay, moving on. Limit work in process. This is a principle that doesn't only drive flow, but also innovation. And we used it many times, but I want to relate the most unlikely setting and where it helped us the most, I think also. So how do you limit a work in process when you're going to rebuild a hospital? Remember the state, right? We lost about 60% of our beds and we needed them dearly. Right now we could actually not earn enough money because we didn't have enough beds. And we didn't have any money to rebuild the hospital, and we didn't have any time because we needed to rebuild it really fast. Or did we? So the first thing we did was that we looked at what we had, and we realized that some of the rooms that was actually still usable was not used to their full potential. So we restructured a bit. Some of our patients were really tiny and easy to move. So we restructured a bit, and we actually found some extra space. So now all of a sudden, this room that previously was VIP class room, it could now be a class 2 room, and could fit 4 beds instead of 1 in there. And we found some room that actually took some of the pressure off, because now we could earn enough money as long as patients came to us. We then applied the principle of limiting work in process to the rebuild itself. All of these rooms were destroyed, as you saw from the earlier pictures. This is basically the entire second floor of the hospital. And we realized that we don't need to rebuild all of this at once. The people in the hospital really wanted to, because they wanted everything to look nice again, but I decided basically that we're not going to rebuild everything. So we're not going to do that, and we're not going to do this. But instead, we will close off the corridor here with a simple wooden plank, and here you can still reach the stairway. And now we're going to rebuild these rooms, limiting rooms rebuilt in progress. When I said that, someone said, oh, you know what? We don't need to rebuild these 2 rooms. We can actually, these are temporary walls. We can just take them down, make 1 big room, and that will be easier to build, faster to build, cheaper to build, faster to maintain, and we can serve more patients in that 1 big room. Also, the patients that we would serve in there is actually lower class patients, which the Salvation Army focus is. So that was done in a couple of months, compared to doing all of this that would have taken years. Fun fact, it was not until about 6 months after I left Indonesia that they actually opened any of this department or that department. And we'll come back to what they did with that department later. This is the before picture. Now you see we cleaned away all the rubbish that was on there, but it's still very, very dirty. And here's the after picture. There's about 2.5, 3 months between these pictures. So now we have this one desk where I stand to take this photo, and you can see all the small rooms with lower class patients that was easy to handle, easy to maintain and monitor. And as I said, when we first started, everyone thought that let's rebuild the whole second floor. That's what we need. But it turned out that we didn't see the need here or here till long after I left the country. It was like 1.5 years after this point. And we had a little mantra and we said, who needs empty beds? Right? Okay, manage for flow. This is where you gain from your whip pain, okay? So I never said explicitly that we wanted flow, and didn't like, okay guys, we're going to lower lead time and stuff like that, but we did many things that any agile team would feel very normal. For example, we had a stand-up every morning with the management team. We had a board. This is the director, by the way, Dr. Lillian. So we had a board here with our tasks. We had the diagram with the stats here. And we showed transparency, we showed everyone that our skin was in the game, all of these things. We had a stand-up meeting, that was very strange for them. But that's not particularly new for you guys, so I won't stay there a long time. One thing that was really, really strange for them was in many regards me. First of all, I was strange in myself, being a Western guy in Indonesia. Then I had some crazy ideas on how to do management. But the strangest part was that I had no formal power. I could not decide a thing, actually. We actually got, and if you don't have any formal power in Indonesia or in very traditional organizations, people will not listen to you. So the Salvation Army headquarters wanted people to listen to me, so we actually had to print a letter and show it to the entire staff like this, where it said like, listen to Marcus. I kid you not. But that was a really strange experience because I kept telling them, I will not decide. I can give you some ideas, but I will not decide. And after about 4 months or so, we started to have a really nice relationship, especially me and the director, because I was coaching her more than deciding. You had a question, sir?
Yeah, well, it sounds like you're a management consultant, right?
Yeah, exactly. The management consultant. I had that for a short while on my LinkedIn profile, but people were teasing me, so I took it down. Okay. So the notion of a coach was really, really strange in this setting. And as I said, it took about 6 months before we found a way of cooperating in a good fashion. And to be honest, I know I have great coaches in the audience. The first 4 months, I was not coaching. I was telling them. So I had to switch positions a little bit. But the intention was all along that I'm here together with you. I'm not doing this. So except from digging the first 2 days, I didn't do anything hands-on in the hospital. It was all them. There's a nice little principle in Kanban stating that we should make our policies explicit. And I wanted to relate a story where I think that Kanban actually saved a life. It at least changed it forever, I know that. The lady in black here, she's called Ibo Elshi. And she's the general manager of Rumah Sakit Bungsu. General manager means that she is in charge of everything that is not finance or health. And that's a lot of things. Food, sewing stuff, security, drivers, maintenance, all kinds of things. You see the faces of the other nurses here? This is in a management meeting. They are not happy. especially her maintenance department was not doing good. They had a lot of things to do, and they were extremely slow. And one day, Ibo Elchi came to me and my colleague Dina Oli, and she asked our help because she was being overworked. And she told us that I have so many things to do, but you keep changing your mind every morning meeting, and I get nothing done. So she spent just her days running around checking on status on everything, and she told me, I don't want to do that anymore because the moment I get into a room, I get 3 new things to do. And she was actually crying when she said that last part. And I totally understand why, because that sounds like hell almost. She was so stressed out. I still remember that when she came to us for help, she could not sit down. We had to, I'm talking about, I had to hold her down on the chair and take her phone out, take her computer away. She was so stressed. So we said, okay, Ibo, we're going to help you. And the first thing we did was, this is not my quote, it's an awesome quote, but it's not mine, it's David Marquis. Move the authority to the information. So the first thing we did was that we addressed the problem with us changing our minds every day. So we had this great morning meeting now with the hospital management. But what I noticed is that lately it's actually been degenerating to us focusing on small details. Details, you think, so what's that? Well, imagine we had a management team of a 160 people organization in the room, and they were talking about the best net to keep rodents out of the sewer. Or which order should the plaques of the doctors be outside the hospital? Or what color should we have in this bathroom? Stuff like that. So I took one of my few direct decisions and I said, okay guys, from now on we will not talk about maintenance anymore in this meeting. And I looked at Ibo Elchi and I said, Ibo Elchi, we trust you to take care of that. You report back to us on Fridays what you have done, and then you, if you have any problems, come here and we'll help you. Other than that, you own that area. That was really a blessing for the management team also, because now we could focus on things that the management team should focus on. Second, we helped her to structure her days. And what we did was basically that we said, you have a morning meeting with your staff every morning, and then you have 1 hour. It was really detailed, right? 1 hour to go around the hospital, not more. And then you have 1 hour to do routine tasks, stuff like that. And then we did something amazing. We had 1 hour of extra time. Every day we had 1 hour of slack in the afternoon. Here you can do stuff that you didn't have time to do. Or take a rest. I suggested to Ibo Elchi and her workers, especially the maintenance guys, that they should work only with 3 things at the same time. And when they have worked with 3, they came to Ibo Elchi and she will give them some more stuff. She gave me a really funny look at that point in time, and she just said, can I do that? And I realized at that point in time that this has been her life for a very, very long time. Finally, we made the policies explicit, and it was really explicit. So we said, from now on, no maintenance work gets done unless you have a yellow slip. And the yellow slip, a little yellow piece of paper, you get that from Ibo Elchi. She's the only one that has those. So she took it and she, okay, you want that lamp fixed? And she wrote it down, and then she handed it out to her staff. No going around her and going to the staff, which had happened a lot before. Okay, so what happened? Well, she should report to us back every Friday, we said, but the first day, Friday was a public holiday in Indonesia. There's 35 public holidays in Indonesia every year. It's the best country in the world to work. So we got the first report after 2 weeks. And just before she did the report, I asked someone, how many things do they normally finish in a week? And they said, yeah, they maybe do 2 or 3 maintenance tasks per week. Okay, so this is 2 weeks, 6 tasks. If they do 10, I would be bananas. That would be so cool. Ibo Elchi reported 46 items completed in 2 weeks. It was the best morning meeting of my life. It went on for about 20 minutes where she just reported stuff. And something amazing happened in that meeting, because all of a sudden there was a new person in the middle here that was filled with pride. And you could hear it when she spoke, because she said, my team did this and then we fixed that. Remember that broken AC? Suda! Fixed. So I actually, after a while it got a little bit boring because it was so long. So I actually took my phone out and I took a little movie here of when she's reporting item 22 to 26. And I wanted to show that to you, and I want you to hear the sound. But you have to realize that 2 weeks ago, the people that are around her, they didn't like her. They were not hating her, but they thought that she was really slow. They were really annoyed with her department. Now look at their faces. Ah, and then I passed.
Saluran pembuangan air Metri renovasi atau pengecatan mawar 3 sudah sempurna.
Suda means fixed, Sampurna means with perfection. Right? So, what happened? This is amazing. From like 6 tasks to 46 and a totally new person. Well, if you want the short answer, it's like we unlocked the awesomeness that Ibo Elche had inside her. She was an awesome leader, no one noticed. We did that with some really simple things. So the first thing was that we moved the authority to the information. She was closest to the information, so we moved it to her. We showed her trust, we required transparency, and gave her accountability of that. I think those 3 goes together. Take away one and you don't get the full picture. We were extremely clear with the policies. This is very easy in a strict hierarchical organization. You just tell the director to say, no, nothing gets done until you get the yellow slip, and everyone is, sir. And they just do it. And finally, we limit the work in process for the people. That's what we did. And I'm convinced that it saved a life. How am I doing with time? Okay, good. I can tell you another story about Ibo Elche because it's really cool. You might wonder why I'm wearing this stupid outfit. This is the Salvation Army uniform in Indonesia. My favorite version of it is called the Safari. It's very nice to have on when it's warm out there. I wore it about the whole time when we were working in the hospital. And I promised the people in the hospital that I would wear it every time I told their story. This particular one is especially important to me because when we changed the policies for Ibo Elche, 2 days after that, she said, I have nothing to do. And something is wrong here. But then I realized that she had plenty of time. About 2 weeks in, she came to me after a morning meeting and she said, Marcus, your sleeve is getting loose. So it fell down like this. And I said, I'll fix that tonight. No, I'll fix it for you, she said. So she used to be one of the, what do you call it? Sewers? No. Sewing ladies, okay? So she said, I'll fix it for you. And I said, but do you have time? You're the general manager of the hospital. Yeah, I have plenty of time. My team has taken it. So it was almost a religious experience for me because I came to her tiny office and she had to fix that. So I had to take my shirt off and she wrapped me in a sheet of clothing there. So I was sitting there waiting and she was sewing because she had time now. Ibo Elche is also another example of another principle that I will just briefly mention here. Remember the start where you are thingy? This means also that initially we don't change a thing. That might change down the road as we find new ways to cooperate, but initially we don't change a thing. And during the entire time we worked with the hospital, we didn't hire a single new person, we didn't fire anyone. So some people left, I think, for other reasons, but other than that, it was the same team. I didn't handpick a single person. Ibo Elchi stepped forward and took new responsibilities within her role. That's one example, and we had a few others examples like that when people started to see and understand why it was important to fix these problems. They also stepped up and helped out. So that was the first time the hospital was saved, because now things started to shape up. They shaped up pretty good and pretty fast as well, actually. So remember this diagram here? This is the same diagram that I showed before, and all of a sudden, boom! We had 134 were our target, 120 was the loose money line, and only a couple of days after we started, we broke 120. People were in disbelief. We had a long discussion about what we were counting, because they thought something is wrong, you're counting the wrong thing. So I said, okay, every time we break this, now you broke this, so I bought cake to the entire hospital to a total cost of about 100 kronor, 100 kroners. And I said, when you break this, I will buy you cake again. And when the average is about 120, I will buy you cake again. No one had ever done something like that for them. So this was like a couple of days in. This is 2 months in. We broke 134 for the first time. And they could not believe that either. Like, what? We met our target? And here's some days were just ridiculously good. This is one of those days where I had to lift one of them up to reach the... But about 6 months in, we actually broke 120 on average. And when that happened, I was the only one that really realized that, because I was running an Excel sheet and on the side, and I said, so I just stood up and screamed, because now, on average, we were not losing money by having the hospital open. That's a watershed moment. So that's really good. We're making money. At this point in time, I started to get a nagging feeling that something was not really... So, I mean, making money, really? Is that the goal of the hospital? That feels a little bit unethical. What's the fastest way of making money? Send home people home when they are sick, and they will come back and we'll make some more money. Okay. So I don't want to do that. So, I mean, the foundation of a hospital has to do something with cure patients, I presume. But I also realized that we need to think about making money if we want to sustain this and survive. If we do that, but the staff that works there hates to work there, people will leave pretty fast, right? So, and there has to be something in here with quality. So we borrowed a concept that I think Bjarte mentioned in a side note called a balanced scorecard. Extremely loosely, to be honest, because we only borrowed the balanced part. But basically we said, okay, so there's many things that we want to be, of course we need to make money, otherwise we will not survive. That's the whole, that's a fact that we can't do anything about. And we need to have some medical quality here that we want to track as well. And we want our staff to be happy. And then this corner was blank. And at this point in time, someone said, remember, this is the Salvation Army. The Salvation Army is a church. So someone said, excuse me, anything about God in there? And it just struck me, yeah, of course. I mean, if we have these three, we're just a hospital. We're not just a hospital, we're a Salvation Army hospital. There has to be something else here. And I can tell you, when I wrote pastoral quality as something that we're going to track, 2 things scared me. First of all, how do you measure that? And the second thing, that was actually the first thing that struck me, was I almost didn't dare write it. Because if you don't say anything to your manager, you would never say anything to a pastor. So every hospital in the Salvation Army has a pastor, or what we call an officer, that is working at the hospital, that's in charge of pastoral quality. And now I said, we're going to track you and measure you on your quality. And she was an old lady with dignity, right? So, but at this point in time, she actually said, yeah, let's do that. Now, as you see, some of these are really simple to track. This is super easy. But these are a little bit hard to track, right? At this point in time, I was reading an awesome book called How to Measure Anything. It's awesome. The first part is great. The second part is really boring. But the first part is so great that it's worth owning. And he has a really nice experiment in there, thought experiment, that helped me to like untangle, because also with medical quality, they were giving me like 35 pages worth of check boxes that we were going to tick in order to find out medical quality. And I didn't want that. I want key performance indicators. Remember Bjarte mentioned that? I wanted an indicator of the value. So he said this, and I used this as an example for pastoral quality. Imagine that we have the hospital here, and now we make a copy out of it. So we have two parallel universes, one here and one here. And in this one, we take the pastor out. There's no pastor here. Now we run these hospitals for a year. What's the difference? If there's no difference, why do we have a pastor? And this started to get them, and the same goes for medical quality. If we don't have a medical quality, why do we even? So this started to get them thinking about that, and we actually came up with a few indicators. I'm not saying that we had measuring pastoral quality, like tapping it. Pastoral quality is all about Jesus-like. So we actually went around asking people, do you see traces of the ideals of Jesus here, actually? And we came up with a few measurements to track this. We came up with a few indicators to track this. And we came up with a few indicators to track this. And we used the same kind of reasoning that we had done for the visualization. And this, what I'm about to show you, is the first version of tracking medical quality. You will not like it. So, because we realized that it's not medical quality, it's quality in everything we do. If the medical quality is good, but the service at the reception desk sucks, people will not come here anyway. So this says, how did you like the service at the Rumah Sakit Bungsu? But I'm sure you picked that out. And I'm a developer, so I built a website for them, and they said, thank you very much, nice website. And they printed and cut out my icons for voting. And then they say, oh, we're going to do this instead, man. We can't stand here with a computer. So this is the first thing we did. This is like Net Promoter Score, right? Simple version of Net Promoter Score. We just said it. And we started to measure trends toward that as well. This principle was what happened next, because we got another challenge, actually. It was in one way equally bad as when the roof fell in, but in another way a little bit more subtle. Because we were now in a place when we earned money, but it turned out that some of the prices that we had was not aligned with the price list from the government. So we needed to lower our income. And another thing that we found out was that the minimum salary per year, minimum salary in the city is adjusted every year, so that we needed to raise our cost. And our nice profit just went away. And this was very tricky, because before it was easy, that we had so much low-hanging fruit of getting people to the hospital. It was like, how about if we ask that clinic next to us? Done. Right? We did some very, very simple things. But now we didn't really know what to do. Because now we were like, so we need to be better than any other hospital in the city. So now we started to adopt a more experimental mindset. And so we'll go here. And we created a new version of our board that looks like this. So this is the board with all our squiggly stuff on it. So the first column was apa, which means monkey in Swedish, and what in Indonesian. So what is the thing that we're trying to do? So for example, we want to bring more patients to the hospital. Let's say that we are still on that. Okay, good. Canapa means why. Why do we need to do that? Yeah, because we need to earn more money in order to sustain the hospital. Okay, then we had a hypothesis. Sorry, lost that one. This column has a hypothesis in it, meaning this is something that we think would help this. So, for example, we said, we think that if we have more operations every day, then that will increase the total number of patients. Because if you have an operation, you normally stay another day or two after the operation. So can we increase the number of operations? Okay, awesome. Now we are in a perfect place because now we can do an experiment. An experiment is when you try to falsify the hypothesis. So now we could say, what's the smallest possible thing we could try to see if our hypothesis that more operations per day would decrease the total number of patients is wrong. Not is right, but is wrong. Okay, so how about the doctors that work here for us temporary? How about if we ask them to move their operations here? Awesome, that's easy, let's ask them. And then we evaluated a few experiments. There's many ways to do this that is much more elaborate than this, and here's two that I urge you to check out. The lean startup movement is really cool and interesting. This is a very interesting thing by a man called Claudio Perrone. This is a process improvement tool called Popcorn Flow. If you haven't checked that out, it's really cool. So now we agreed to pursue evolutionary change. And this happened without me noticing it at all. And I can tell you exactly when it happened. Because one morning, our board looked like this. So now, I'm walking over here. Here's our what Canapa hypothesis experiment. And for the experiments, we had a rule. If you do an experiment, this has to be a graph that shows how the experiment is doing. So this one is the number of operations per day, and this is the total number of patients. I'm sorry, I had a really crappy phone in Indonesia. One morning, Dr. Lillian walked up to the board. She was now conducting all the morning meetings, and she said, okay, guys. She stood in front of this board, and she looked at the diagrams, and she said, so, as it looks from where I stand, there's no significant change in we didn't get more patients here, and that didn't affect this one. And then she turned to the management team and she said, okay, what do you want to try now? And I was in the background just smiling. And I told her in our coaching session afterwards, I said, you know what you just did? You're running your company like they do startups in Silicon Valley. So they were like borderline A/B testing their theories, right? So they came up with another experiment and started to see if, okay, we need to see that this goes over this magical line. And they came up with another one and they could increase it. And the best part of this is that when I left the hospital after 1.5 years, they kept evolving. In fact, they kept evolving long over what I thought was even possible. So after a while, just before I left, we started to decide to not count services sold. We just count the number of patients in our hospital, and we had a goal of 55 patients in our hospital every day. Then they called me back and said, "Our goal now we have passed 55, and our goal now is 70." And I said, "You can't do 70. You don't have enough beds." "Oh, we have opened a new department." And we opened another department on the side where we now have a new kind of clinic. Oh, what kind of clinic is that? We opened an HIV clinic. And that was really good because that department has a separate door, so you don't have to go through the entire hospital, because we don't want HIV patients to do that because there's a big stigma with HIV in Indonesia. So now they were innovating their business. And I was in Sweden. I wanted to end the story on a little bit more of a personal note with two things that I think affected this that is not Kanban related. The first one has to do with my faith, so bear with me here. You could call this a miracle of God. Now, Kanban works without God, I think. I've never tried that, but you can go ahead if you want to. But there's something about this hospital being in dire need of some very, very dear help, and me living 200 meters from that house at exactly the same time. That is more than a coincidence in my world. This is the last picture I have from the hospital. This is 5 minutes after, before I leave the hospital. And you wouldn't know from this picture, but that's my wife, and here's me, and all of us has been crying. Because it was a very emotional day. And after this happened, in Asia, if you get together, you take a photo. I expected that, and I expected what happened after that as well, and that was that everyone was lining up, and we had a big line of hugs, and I expected that as well. But what I didn't expect was what they whispered in my ear as I was hugging each and every one of them, because they were all saying the same thing, with small variants. They said this. You were friendly. You didn't yell at us even though we were bad. You wanted to help us. As I've said a number of times, I didn't do anything here. I used my shovel the first couple of days, and I helped and coached the team. But these guys here, these are the ones that made it happen. They are also the reason I'm still talking about this. They are the reason I'm writing a book about this, because I want to tell their story. They made it happen. But if I did anything, I brought some love and friendliness there in a place where people were just bashing them. When I got sent to the hospital, they said, try to help them, Marcus, but also try to check if we can sell the hospital. No one believed in them. No one trusted that they would turn this around. Not even me. But they did it. And I think that the friendliness and love actually helped to turn this hospital around. So that's my story. God bless you. Tuan member Katianda.